Hello, friends. I'm Kush Khandelwal, and this is Ageless Athlete. A few years ago, I started asking questions that would not leave me alone. Why do some people keep pushing mentally, physically, spiritually long after others burn out or break down? What does it really mean to age well when you still crave movement, meaning, and mastery? This show is my search for answers. Each week, I talk to elite athletes, everyday adventurers, and pioneering researchers who are stretching the limits of what's possible across age, injury, illness, and self doubt. You will hear hard won lessons, untold stories, and science backed strategies for building a body and mindset that lasts. For those of us joining for the first time, welcome to the show. For the rest, thank you for joining us again. Time is our most valuable asset, and I deeply appreciate you giving me your time today. Today, we wrap up our three-part series with physiotherapist, coach, and lifelong climber Andy McVittie. I am your host, Kush Khandelwal. If you haven't listened to part one and two from earlier this year, I highly recommend going back. In part one, we broke down the biggest myths about aging and performance. In part two, we took deep dives into shoulders, elbows, fingers, and knees, covering the simple, powerful things you can do to keep moving well for life. And now, in part three, we turn our attention to some of the most overlooked but essential areas: hips, ankles, and feet. We explore what goes wrong, how to prevent long term issues, and how to rebuild strength and mobility if you have been carrying old injuries. We also talk about returning to activity over time off and building a realistic weekly maintenance plan. And Andy's take on recovery tools, what actually matters, and what's just noise. Yes, this might make you think deeper about the cold sauna that you were planning to invest in. Maybe you don't need anymore. Okay, so this is a fitting close to one of the most practical and thoughtful series we have ever done on the show. So let's dive into part three with Andy McVittie. Andy, it's been such a pleasure having these conversations with you. And the response to the first two episodes was incredible.
Cool.
We have already covered so much, from joint specific challenges to tendon health to recovery and some of the mindset shifts that come with aging. Today, I would love to round things out a bit.
Mhm.
There are still a few areas we haven't touched on much, like hips and ankles and feet. And I also want to get your take on returning to activity after injury or time off, and
Mhm.
what recovery looks like after the ripe age of 40 or so, and how people can structure their weeks to stay strong and resilient for the
Yeah.
long haul. How does that sound for broad agenda for today? And if you have
Yeah.
any comments or things you would like to also bring up.
No, sounds interesting. Sounds good to me. It's always it's just been really good to have the opportunity to get not well my thoughts, I suppose, but not just my thoughts, what the literature suggests out there, and hopefully push back a little against the societal messages that we're all done for once we're 30, even never mind 40. So yeah.
And one thing that I've loved about the chats, Andy, is how you also, as we talk about the body, you also keep reminding us how important mindset is about aging. So, okay to let the conversation drift into that realm as well. With your permission, yeah, let's jump in.
Hmm.
In the past, we spoke about shoulders and elbows, and we spent time on knees as well.
Hmm.
But I feel in general, hips and ankles, they are neglected. And so what's going on with these joints as we age? And yeah, what kind of issues do your clients bring up? How do you approach them
Hmm.
in your world?
So often with ankles, I find people who have had a history with, maybe one ankle in particular quite often. And it can often go back to, maybe a fairly major incident 20 years ago, something like that, where, they will say they were on crutches for a while. And you talk through, actually had a patient today, although their incident was only 2 years ago. Bad enough that they went to hospital. The hospital was surprised it wasn't a fracture, that nothing was broken, a really bad sprain. They were on crutches for weeks. And when I said, okay, and so what was the follow-up? What was the rehab? They'd got it pain-free and learned how to stand on one leg. And then that was it. And this is the common thing that we see, and it really sounds like physical therapists or physios are banging on about this message sometimes, and people I think take it in the wrong way, thinking that we're just trying to get an extra appointment out of people and trying to get more money and this kind of thing. Is to do a proper rehab. I think anybody in that example can see that was not going to take that athlete, that person, back to boulder, catching a bouldering fall or whatever it might be. It's just not at the correct level. And so often what I see is a history of that. And it might be somebody has that in their ankle, and it's bothered them for a long time. It has maybe had some residual either inhibitions or weaknesses in there that have actually then caused true joint problems over time. We do know, if you have trauma to a joint, there is a greater chance over time of that developing, inappropriate levels of arthritis that will, cause us joint restriction, pain, stiffness, that type of thing. So it's obviously, it's often rather, it's actually coming across that, and there's a history with it rather than it being, I've just sprained my ankle, the other week. There'll be a story behind it. And so, yes, you can get somebody coming in and saying, I've not had a recent injury to my ankle, but it's just been getting worse and worse and worse. And now it's in this condition. And sometimes that is a referral, orthopedics. We think something might be going on in there. We need to have a look, a scan, see what the joint health is like. But even if the joint health is not where we would like it to be, we aim to strengthen it, even if it requires, I'm making a big jump here, even if it requires an operation. We want to strengthen it because we know the outcomes of an operation are directly linked to how strong and functional that joint is when you go into the operation. And not just the ankle. We want to look at the knee. We want to look at the hip. If somebody's been carrying something for a long time, they're probably moving differently, which sometimes leads to the joint issue. If they've been moving differently for a long time with restricted patterns of movement is what we often see. So instead of the joint surface as a whole taking the load in lots of different ways with lots of variety and variability, the joint gets impacted in the same place over and over and over again. Yeah, but my answer a lot of the time is to find the right level to come in at where we can start strengthening and to build some confidence. Some people, the rehab finishes with hopping, leaping, bounding, very plyometric, this, that, and the other. For other people, that's potentially not going to be possible, but we work with what we can. And the idea of strengthening the whole leg or the whole side sometimes even is about sharing that load. If the ankle can't take as much load anymore, then let's share some of that load through the knee and the hip and make sure that everything's moving as well as it can there and everything's as strong as it can be there. So whether, we talk about the hip and such like shortly, but I always come back, always, but most often come back to strengthening, starting at a position that we can tolerate and we can get some input into it, but then address the whole leg, not just that joint that they're coming with.
Andy, very helpful. Your part about people having some history often before it becomes something acute, I think it rings home for me. I sprained my ankle a few years ago, and the sprain happened somewhat accidentally in a very let's say non-dramatic way. I was just climbing, and
Normally does.
I over torqued it. I just over pronated,
Yeah.
and anyways, but then I realized later that my ankle or my right ankle had been weak for a long time. I would sometimes have, my foot almost give out when I was running or walking fast, and I kind of ignored it. And I think, of course, the body, warns you, and then when it cannot warn you anymore, then it like does something more dramatic in my
Yeah,
case
yeah.
with the ankle sprain. So, are there any signs or symptoms people can look for when they know that, okay, my ankle is having issues? If I don't attack it now, it might lead to something worse later. I've been thinking a lot about energy, not just in training, but in recovery, in focus, in how we age. So when I came across NutriSense, it hit home. It's a program that pairs a 24 by 7 glucose biosensor with a dedicated dietitian to help you understand how your body responds to food, stress, sleep, and movement, and then act on the data. I chose it because I wanted something real, not another hack or one size fits all plan, just honest insight into what's actually going on inside me and how to build habits that last. NutriSense has helped over 150,000 people take that step. And if you want to try it, you can get 33% off your first month with code Ageless15 at nutrisense.io. Again, that's nutrisense.io, code Ageless15. You can also find this information on the show notes for this episode.
I don't think there's anything in particular to look out for. If you have recognized that one ankle is different to the other, you need to do something about it, even if it's not actually giving you pain at the time. These are as soon as you start to feel, that, I can do something on one leg that I can't on my other, whether that's the ankle, knee, hip, or whatever it might be that's restricting that. Goes back to what we said in the previous episode, that if you start noticing that you always get up from the floor in a certain direction, think why, do something about that. If you're changing the way that you're doing something, if you're cutting a corner, if you're not, in how you move, notice that. We're very fortunate, I think, as climbers, that we're pretty in tune with ourselves. We're looking and analyzing our movement and ourselves quite often, or we should be. And if you notice something different, don't wait, do something about it, because at that point it will be a small task to do something about it. Easy to say, not so easy to do. Human nature is also, we don't prioritize something until it becomes a priority. So no criticism of people, myself included, who, I wouldn't say stick your head in the sand, but we maybe don't pay attention to the things that we should.
how important is overall ankle mobility for, yeah, not just for hikers and climbers, but for, I think many of us, myself included, we never think enough about it. I think we think about
Mm.
mobility with hips, with shoulders, but I think ankles don't get that kind of attention.
No, yeah, true. And they are the contact with the floor. I would say, for us as climbers, they're as important as fingers. They are they make the contact and they direct everything upwards from there, whether this be walking, climbing, whatever. So if there is a restriction or a difference there, then it will change things all the way up the chain as to how we move. Ankle mobility has been correlated quite strongly in a couple of pieces of research that I've seen with climbing performance, in as much as those who climb higher grades tend to have greater ankle mobility. And if you think about that, then that, the positions that you're able to get into, the changes you can make to your center of gravity from the same set of footholds that somebody else might be hanging out from and is less efficient and that type of thing, or slabs, slopey footholds, all that type of thing, to make maximum contact and get as much rubber contact as possible. But as a whole, if you've ever met anybody, for example, who's had something like ankle fusion surgery or even fusion of a joint within the foot or the toe, they will be moving. You won't need to be a physical therapist to spot that they're moving differently. Their biomechanics have been greatly altered. It's a really important, and I suppose the reason we take it for granted is because they don't go wrong all that often, to be honest. They're a pretty amazing piece of engineering, and pretty robust, and they do an awful lot. Yeah, but if it comes to the point where something needs to be done within there, that can be quite a change for people, particularly climbers.
Ankles are an extraordinary piece of equipment that we are born with.
Yeah.
Because somebody pointed this out to me once, which was, unlike your knees, ankles move in all kinds of directions, and they support so much weight.
Yeah.
And we don't need to go into ankle exercises, but is there maybe a simple drill you can teach us, Andy, on how to simply just test for ankle strength or ankle mobility, on whether we are doing fine with that level of mobility, or one needs to maybe just add some strengthening or stretching into one's routine?
There's a few. I mean, the classic sort of, and within the ankle here, I'm going to include the muscles above that of the calf, which are super important for
Absolutely.
power, propulsion, that type of thing. So there are some absolute classics, like the heel raise, so you stand on your toe, very light amount of support into a point such as a wall, and can you achieve the sort of standard thinking for a number is around about 25 single leg calf raises for somebody maybe who runs, that type of thing. But they're actually quite hard to do and quite hard to measure. People will go at different speeds, so they might smash out 25 in a handful of seconds, 12 seconds or something, whereas it might take somebody else a minute. Well, that's very different regarding endurance and strength if we're looking at that. So they have to be sort of standardized, often with a metronome, reaching a certain quality with each repetition. People will do all sorts when you ask them to raise their heel off the floor. They can lean forwards to make it happen. They can bend at the knee to make it happen. And that's actually not loading the calf. Now, me looking at that tells me something about that person, and why aren't they wanting to go there? Why is the nervous system avoiding and such like? But your calf raises in whatever way you choose to do them are a good measure of overall ankle function, I suppose. There are other things to look at, eversion, inversion, it's a little bit tricky to be talking about measuring those. There's the knee to wall test. So if you place your foot at the bottom of a wall and lean forwards with your knee, how far can you take your foot away from the wall and still touch with your knee without the heel raising off the ground? And looking at differences again, I would say, is the main thing. Noticing is one much different than the other. There are some norms for that. Round about sort of 10 centimeters is a nice distance to be able to achieve. I've seen normal, that's not an issue with a lot less, and I've seen much greater, because we're all on that curve somewhere. So it's having a look at yourself and finding what's normal for yourself. It is quite a complicated joint. It's like saying, what are the things to look out for in the shoulder? Well, there's tons, and some can be quite tricky to measure as well. So it's not but it's having a benchmark, having an idea. Can I do 25 good quality heel raises? And if you test again next year, I can only do 15. Something's happened there, hasn't it, that we might need to address and look into.
So I think the heel raises, it seems like that's one really good benchmark, because that was part of my physio program, and then I've had other friends tell me the same thing. So just very quickly, so this is just articulating the drill for people listening. Please correct me. I think it is balancing on one leg and using minimal amount of support with your hands,
like a finger on a wall or something.
That's a good one. Finger on the wall. And then starting from the heel on the ground, and then raising it all the way up as much as one can. And I think that's one rep. And then doing it 25 times. Is there an indication on how high we should raise the knee? Oh, sorry, how high we should raise the ankle? And second is, will it improve the drill if we start from like an elevated surface, like a stair, like a step, and then go down lower? Because when one does that, I know it also helps stretch out, the calf a little bit.
And you're working through full range at that point, and that's super relevant for climbers. If I was going to work as an exercise, then potentially, yes, we would go there with the heel being free and ready to drop down lower than the toes are. But for a standardized test, I would go from the floor most of the time, unless there's something really specific. I have just remembered there is an app called Calf Raise. Which is free, I believe, I think, or certainly very cheap, if not free. And it's an attempt to set up and film yourself doing it. And it's one of these that uses, but that's quite common now in weightlifting and Olympic lifting, where people want to track the bar and track the bar velocity and that kind of thing. And it will measure your ankle and your height that you're gaining with each. Because yes, you're quite correct. One of the things to look out for is when you can no longer reach that high point. And that's I forget the correct term now. Is it functional failure or something like that? Or, you've not actually failed. You could still probably do quite a lot of, quite a few more calf raises. But for the purposes of the test, that's a fail. The quality has dipped. And so it is 25 good quality calf raises. But yes, that app, I had forgotten about it. I've used it a few times now, and it seems quite good. Gives lots of information for physios and such like as well. But you can just use it. It will measure your height and it has a timer on it as well. It's recommended as well to use a metronome, sort of 1 second up, 1 second down, 1 second. So we've got that standardized approach to it, so that people don't cheat, because the body is fantastic at cheating.
Yeah, this is brilliant, Andy. I did not. Thanks for pointing us to this app, which seems to excel at this very specific purpose in helping us evaluate the quality and our skill
Yeah, it's
in
important.
doing these
Yeah.
calf races correctly. Any last points on ankles before we move on to chatting about our sexy hips?
I would say if you have an issue with your ankle, or even if you feel you don't have an issue with an ankle, but you are anxious about dropping off, about walking on unsteady ground, about walking with a pack, that kind of thing. If you've got anxiety around something to do with the ankle, then get that seen to. That's your real sign that your nervous system is telling you, not when it's reasonable. If you are genuinely in some extremist, then fair enough. But if what used to be a normal activity for you, and you're thinking, I don't want to do that because I don't trust my ankle, then go get some help. That would be my biggest tip.
Brilliant. Yeah, we have two real takeaways here. One is one can use this app and test oneself right now, do that drill against a wall. And then second is, yes, any ongoing concerns with being able to walk on uneven surfaces or with weight or whatnot, then yes, don't delay. Don't delay. Take a look at that now and address that. Awesome, Andy. So again, that was great. Moving on to our sexy hips. It seems that more and more people I meet now or hear from in their 40s, 50s or longer seem to have hip issues and seem to be needing hip replacements. And maybe there's some confirmation bias here, maybe because yes, I am listening for that kind of input, but I'm curious, why are so many people, and maybe I'm wondering if this is your experience as well, because I see all these normally healthy people, active people who are having hip issues. Has that been your observation at all?
Yes. So I come across, a reasonable percentage of older athletes who have had hip replacements. Why? There are definitely getting better now, but definitely lots of people who are undiagnosed with issues like hip dysplasia, that can have difficulties through life, and then certainly cause issues later in life, because we've had not the correct control of the hips throughout the life. So there's people that weren't screened, weren't picked up with underlying issues. Then there's just the fact, the nature of the hip joint. I'm not going down the line of wear and tear, because we know people who are active generally have less joint problems and less arthritis and that type of thing than people who are inactive. But the shape of everybody's socket and the shape of the head of the thigh of the femur and the angle that it comes in at and such like are vastly different in everybody. And there are all sorts of weird and wonderful kind of things that can go on. It's also, I feel, because people used to get, the advice was to leave it as long as you possibly could before you needed to do it. You had to be in real severe disability through pain, because it's a major operation and it would only last sort of 10 years. So if you have one when you're 50, well, you're going to need another one when you're 60 and then 70 and then 80. And these are all major surgeries and revisions, and that's very, complex. And then it turned out that the ones that they, were originally fitting that they thought might last a few years were lasting 25 years, 30 years. And it's like, oh, and that was, 25, 30 years ago. So the technology, it's still major surgery. But, I remember from my training working in the British NHS and such like that, you get people out of bed the same day that they've had a hip replacement. Yeah, they really don't want to. They don't like you for it. Because it's a sort of a 6 to 8 week, so not full recovery within that time, but certainly people can be back being reasonably active, quite soon after hip replacement surgery. So it's just not the risk maybe that it thought it would be. The revisions that have to be done are much fewer and far between now, because they've learned so much, because they've done so many. It's just not a big issue that it used to be. It's not like, well, if I have this done, I'll never be able to climb again. It's like, I'll have this done, and in a few months I'll be back to climbing harder than I was before I had it done. Hopefully. It's not the same for everybody, but hopefully. Yeah. So I think that they're now seen as let's get it done if you can.
Friends, it means a lot that you're here. I pour a ton of heart into the show. The research, the interviews, the editing. It's all me, trying to share stories that matter. If Ageless Athlete has ever made you feel seen, inspired you, or just kept you company on a long drive, or better, over a run or a bike ride, I would be so grateful if you considered supporting it. Even a small amount helps keep it going, helps keep bringing the show to you for free. You can chip in at buymeacoffee.com/agelessathlete. Again, buymeacoffee.com/agelessathlete. You can find the link on the show notes as well. Thank you for listening and for being part of this. That's incredible. Funny, but yeah, I had Tyler Nelson early on in the podcast. Tyler Nelson is another well-known PT specializing with climbers, and Tyler spoke of his hip dysplasia. And at that time, that was a new term to me. And then I've been having some hip issues, and a few months ago, I went through some comprehensive imaging, and turns out that I have hip dysplasia as well. And I was like, oh, okay, that explains a few things. It's not just maybe my poor lifestyle or whatnot. There are some medical there's some medical pathology here. So are these people now who are finding out about hip dysplasia, is there somewhat of a reasonable correlation between having these like misaligned hip sockets and having hip issues later in life, and otherwise, like you said, like healthy active people?
Yeah, essentially. I mean, hip dysplasia is a anatomical variance, a difference in the depth of the socket. So it's shallower than it should be. So that ball is not, securely within the socket. And so the control and the stability that's required to keep that hip under control and as it should be is much greater, and often greater than the person can apply. So yes, we do get issues then later in life with people with hip dysplasia. The treatment for it, if it's noted and diagnosed, earlier in life, is increase the strength and control of the pelvic girdle, the hip as a whole, and to support the joint as much as possible. And strengthening is, there are certainly in the UK, I know there are hip dysplasia specialist physios, both private and within the NHS, who specialize within that, which is fantastic, because it's much more common than we previously realized.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, super interesting. Yeah, for yourself and Tyler. But yeah, does it mean you are more likely to have issues later in life? Yes. Is that absolutely 100% your destiny? No, but it's much more likely. It's on an individual basis, but yes, it's more likely. It increases the chances for sure.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess just getting it diagnosed, it may not, yeah, you can't really correct it in your later years, surgically maybe as effectively, but at least having that awareness might give people peace of mind that there are some latent things, and then maybe, yes, then they can double down and meet specialists like the ones you spoke about who can
Yeah,
do specific PT interventions. Okay, having said that, just like we talked about with the ankle, what are some of those issues with hip strength, lack thereof, hip mobility, hip issues that people bring to you, Andy? And what are some of the most common courses of corrective action that you have them go through?
I think probably one of the most common in and around the hips is probably a tendinopathy related, either gluteal tendinopathy or lateral hip tendinopathy, so glute med, that type of thing, or even issues like IT band syndrome, iliotibial band syndrome. It's nice a lot of the time because people come in maybe their 40s, their 50s, and they're like, I've got pain at the front of my hip, and you pick up on the fact that maybe they've got some anxiety, that they're already thinking, oh, this is the first signs that I'm going to have a hip replacement. This is bad. I've read that pain at the front of the hip is, sign of arthritis and such like. And thankfully, a lot of the time, it's not. Sometimes it is, but a lot of the time, it's not. And so tendinopathies, I would suggest, actually, around the hip are the things that I see most. I'm discounting hamstring tendinopathy there. I'd put that as something else, although they do insert up there. But yeah, for the actual hip itself, I would say, yeah, tendinopathies. And that often comes from a medium to long term change that has happened, that we go back to the ankle, perhaps, that they're not weighting that side as much, they're not using it as much, they're changing their motion in some way. The classic is people will say that that they step down or up, either be on a walk-in or on a hike or whatever. They will always use the other leg. They might not know they're doing it to take the step up, and then the step down, they will always use that leg to support as they drop down with the other foot, because they're not trusting that foot, or it's sore or whatever it might be, and that deconditions the whole leg. And we then start getting people reporting pain when they've been driving or sat for a time, and then they stand up and they're like, they start making noises when they stand up, is always the is always the sign. Yeah. And if that's where we are, and that's what it appears to be, then it's noting that. And again, we come back to physio can be very simple sometimes, is finding the correct way in that's pain-free and strengthening and increasing the function of that limb as much as we can. But getting some relief is often the first thing for people with hip pain.
Right on. And you again, great observation that people tend to then keep relying on the one leg that is working better. And
Yeah.
then when you do that, I think it just creates like a doom loop. The less you use the injured part of your body, the
Yeah.
really the more attenuated it gets over time.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Besides just these signs people have of feeling any kind of weakness, pain in those hips. And in my case, I actually started hearing clicks, on my
Right.
hips, the way
Hmm.
one sometimes does with one's knees when your knees are
Yeah.
affected. Any other signs that people should look for, Andy, just to, be smart and preempt?
If you notice or somebody points out to you that you're making a ooh sound when you stand up now, you know, that didn't used to be normal for you. So go and get that looked at. If it takes you 2 or 3 seconds to stand upright, yeah, but you're having to unfold yourself slowly because your hips hurt as you stand up. That's yeah, again, that's not usual. Get that looked at. And it's these societal messages that people will be like, oh, well, yeah, I've got sore hips. I'm in my 40s, I'm in my 50s or whatever. What do I expect? That's how it should be. That's what everybody
Mm,
says. And yeah, you talk to your friends about it or whatever, and they're, oh, yeah, same happens to me. Yeah, same happens to me too. And yeah, so we just accept it. We sort of put up with it and think, right, that must be, that's just how it is. But if there's a change, so internal and external rotation of the hip, these 90-90 sits that people do, sort of pigeon stretch type things. Well, maybe not pigeon stretch, but the where you have you hit your knees that way. I don't know how I'd do this on the fit, and then you flip that way, and the 90-90 sits and stretches. And again, find what's your normal range. Don't try and copy other people's ranges, as we've just here. There's also the other variant of is not too bad. My range laterally, going in like side split type thing, it's dreadful. But I know from pushing that doesn't get me anything other than really sore hips. Yeah, that's feels
yeah.
to me like bone pushing against bone. That's my bony anatomy just doesn't let me go there. So find what's normal for you. If you have a stretching routine, that kind of thing, just notice if you're losing range somewhere. If you can't drop knee, yeah, you're suddenly finding it hard to frog in a rest position and that kind of thing. That's your hips external rotation. Yeah, drop knees, the internal rotation side of things. But the body's super amazingly adaptable. I see people with poor internal rotation but can still deep drop knee because they will change what's happening with the angle of the hip and the trunk, in order to facilitate that. They'll just get it from somewhere else. So don't always rely on that, but maybe just, again, it's this, does that side feel different than that side? If I drop knee that way, does that feel smooth and fluid? If I drop knee that way, does a loud click or a clunk happen? And it feels different. Clicks and things and even noises. There's the awful term crepitus. I yeah, that I know if it's not associated with pain is harmless. But I very rarely do anything like press ups because all I can hear are my elbows creaking away. and it just doesn't feel or sound nice. Unfortunately, I don't think I really need to do many press ups, but yeah, I'm aware that's harmless as such, as long as I say it's pain free, but it's not very nice. But yeah, clicks and new noises, and get them checked out. No reason why not. No
Yeah.
reason. There is all sorts of clunking hip syndrome. If you've ever come across that, which is the oh gosh, I'm going to try and so it's to do with the iliopsoas muscle, the hip flexor. It can be the muscle of the iliotibial band on the outside, but it's more commonly on the inside of the hip. And people, maybe when they do something like a straight leg raise or an L sit, that kind of thing, and there's a real deep clunk within the hip itself, and that can be both uncomfortable and quite disturbing. If it's new, if it's something you've had all your life, that's probably just how it is for you. If it's new, that shows there's probably been a bit of a change. what it actually is the tendon of the iliopsoas muscle flicking over something that I want to call it the iliopectineal eminence. I might have got that wrong. I'll show myself up. People will be pointing the fingers at me, but it's kind of, there's a small bump on the bone that the tendon now flicks over instead of being held in place. And if that's changed, it can feel quite drastic where people think, oh my gosh, it feels like the hip's popping out or something, but it's this quite distinct clunk of a muscle. But if that's not normal for you, get that checked out, because something's changed somewhere. The control of your hip has changed. But yeah, clunking hip syndrome. So,
Yeah, new term that I'm learning about.
yeah.
A question I have for you is, many, let's say, longevity influencers and even specialists perhaps talk about this thing called the sit and rise test,
Okay.
which relies, on the whole lower body chain, but I think it relies disproportionately on one's hip strength and mobility to be able to bring one's body up from a sitting lotus position to standing without using one's hands or knees. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
I have seen the online, so, can you do this? Then that means you're going to live till you're 80, or
Yes.
you won't die if you can still do this. There are some ratified tests, the sit to stand test, so getting out from a chair of a certain height, or compared to the person's height, so many times, either within a minute, or how long it takes to do that so many times, either without hands or gentle hand, and that's all very quantified and checked. Again, as we've spoken before about like grip strength and that kind of thing, more in population maybe that's in a nursing home or a care home or that kind of thing. Yes, it definitely makes a difference amongst that population. Rising from the lotus position, I don't think I could. I don't know. I am obviously going to have to try straight after this, and I'll let you know. I'll send you a message. But
Okay.
yeah, what does that mean? Am I doomed?
Well, I think I mean, there could be many such tests, right? This is just one that seems to have caught people's imaginations.
Yeah, and
Yes.
I'm all for, and anything that encourages people to take an interest in their bodies, to notice something about themselves, and to be a bit active. And that's the kind of thing that maybe, you do. Don't just do it once, whether it's can you get off the floor without using your hands, your grip strength, your whatever it is that you might, choose to engage with. Do it every 3 months if it's not part of your daily practice, and just notice, can I still do it? That's the important thing. If I could do it 3 months ago, but I can't do it today, something's changed, hasn't it? Yeah, and that's the key to tests, is not to do it once and then go, yes, I'm going to live till I'm 80. It's to keep checking in with them and seeing what they're telling you now.
Well, one thing that I do, and I'm a lazy note taker, but I do this with exactly these things. And I do make these notes on some of these particular types of mobility and strength markers that I'm concerned about. And then I come back to them. And I think maybe even sometimes using an app like the one that you pointed us to earlier. I mean, some of those apps also have, that note marking ability. So if one
Yeah, they
uses
can
an app,
record.
which, exactly. And they can tell us what's changed. I mean, people do that all the time with like weight management apps, because again, people are very conscious about their weight often. But there are other pieces of technology one can also employ in a quest to, stay healthy and fit. Great, Andy. We spent some time talking about these specific joints with our lower body. Any spot there that you feel we haven't covered before we move on to the next? Hello, friends. Just a quick break. This is not an ad. If you have been enjoying these conversations, I would love for you to subscribe to my newsletter. It is where I go deeper, sharing stories, reflections, and behind the scenes insights that don't always make it into the podcast. I write about what I'm learning from elite athletes and how to stay ageless in body and mind. If you have ever wanted a thoughtful, inspiring read that ties it all together: training, aging, mindset, and awe. You will love this. You can find the link in the show notes or just head to agelessathlete.co. Again, www.agelessathlete.co, that is, to sign up. And yeah, just a couple of emails a month, and you can unsubscribe anytime. Absolutely no spam ever. Okay, back to the show.
Oh, I don't think so. But if
Okay.
nothing that yeah, I feel should be. I think we've done everything. I think we've done everything. It's good.
Okay, let's move on then, Andy. I thought
Yeah.
we could spend a few minutes talking about uh, recovery
Mm,
tools and which ones actually matter and help us.
mm.
And again, in this hyper capitalism that we are surrounded by, there is no shortage of recovery tools that we see around us. Yeah, massage guns and cold plunges and saunas and red light therapy and even apps that we just spoke of. So yeah, curious, where do you stand on those? Which ones, in your opinion, actually are useful, and which ones are just noise that we can want? Because yes, there's so much information out there. Sometimes it's confusing. Which should I be, should I be doing these? Should I be getting a super expensive cold plunge thing outside my house, even though it is just the most horrifying thing to actually use? Should I just stick with my lacrosse ball? Like what should people be doing,
I'm
Andy?
totally with you. Yeah. So I tend to view this as, if something has true merit and is easy to apply and is affordable, it's a real thing that can be out there for everybody, it will be around and it will stay, because it's like it's the thing, it's good to do. The best things are sleep, nutrition, hydration, yeah, reducing life stress, that kind of thing. But we know that. I almost feel bad skipping over it, so I'm going to say it again. The basics are what, that's 90% of your recovery is the basics, and without doing those, everything else you're losing. But things like, for example, massage. I was talking to somebody about that today. It physiologically doesn't change things hugely. There is some fluid exchange that happens and some increase in blood flow and that type of thing. So why is it so popular? Why do all the professional sports teams have, kind of like a permanent masseur on hand at any time for their, and mainly because it makes you feel really good. And there's nothing wrong with that. If we're not covering up an injury by changing how we feel, if that makes sense, sort of like taking pain relief in order to be able to do something we maybe shouldn't be doing, then a massage, be it from a gun, a person, whatever you, can make the difference between feeling I can't go again, yeah, or I can't go tomorrow, it needs to be a rest day, or maybe getting another climb in. This is why professional sports teams have them. It can make the player go from feeling non-recovered, unrecovered, to feeling good enough and positive about themselves to get out on the pitch. And we do know there is a lag between being recovered and our subjective actually feeling recovered. So this is all, again, nuanced, contextual, this kind of thing. I'm not just saying have a massage and crack on if it's your 8th day of climbing in a row, that kind of thing. That's obviously not sensible. Let's not cover things up and try and ignore things. But yeah, a regular massage, can be a great thing. I've been experimenting recently with taking the massage gun to the crag when I'm sport climbing. This is more last year, actually, as I haven't sport climbed much this year. I've been trad climbing. And just like, can I get an extra burn on this today? And you're just thinking, oh, I'm not sure. Blast the forearms. And I'm like, whoo, I feel zingy. I feel good to go again. I've had some strange looks at the crag. But, I've not seen a negative to that. I'm only talking about, squeezing out one more go. Maybe when I feel I could, but I would have to rest much longer and everyone else wants to go, that kind of thing. So that can change things perceptually and make you feel okay to go. So a tool to be used with some thought, but definitely, a powerful tool. Sauna, cold baths, all this type of thing, or even heat or cold to deal with swelling or an injury for pain relief. There's so much on either side that says cold is best, heat is best, whatever it might be. But they're all, or most that I've seen, are a small way in this direction or a small way in that direction. There's very few that definitively say this is way better than cold or you should do. And essentially they both arrive at the same place via a different route. If we look at applying cold to an injury, to a swelling, that kind of thing, it constricts all the blood vessels, forces the fluid out of there and the swelling out of there. And then when the blood vessels dilate again, once they warm back up to body temperature, that encourages new fluid and new blood and plasma and such like into the area, which helps the healing. Heat, dilation of the blood vessels, encourages extra blood flow, etc., etc. Really, the advice is go with which one feels better for you. Some people like the powerful feeling of cold, of ice, of overcoming, jumping in that bath and, I'm doing a thing to myself. I can feel it. This is like, super strong, super powerful. Other people prefer, this is me, prefer the comfort of some warmth. And, that's nice for me. I'd rather just lie down and be warm. Thank you. Have a nice warm bath rather than a cold bath. Or if I've got something that's sore that I want to apply something to, I'll go for heat rather than cold. But I wouldn't say to a patient, choose one over the other. They're both as effective as each other. And the psychological side of it, again, is quite important.
Well, I love, Andy, how you started off by underscoring the importance of the basics.
Yeah.
Sleep, nutrition.
Every day, man.
Yeah, every day. Yeah, I mean, exactly. Like that is really the cornerstone, and everything else here is just the last mile. And people need to remember to, again, focus on those things, get those right before one starts titrating on these other modalities. But quickly, I wanted to just ask you this one, which is, yes, I get the point about using cold versus hot and just using the one that feels better for compression or for like some sort of daily ritual. But what about the plunges, Andy? Because it just seems like so many athletes seem to swear by cold plunges, and maybe even, doing that whole system of alternating the sauna with the cold plunge. And
I mean, that's been around for hundreds of years, man. Yeah, when I went to Morocco earlier this year, we went to a hammam, and the hot room, the cold room, all that. It's been in culture, Northern Europe, in Norway, in Sweden, and let's get in the sauna now. Let's run out in the cold and roll around in the snow and whack ourselves with birch sticks and this kind of thing. Yeah, it's been part of our culture for thousands of years, I would guess. There's a Roman fort near where I used to live in the English Lake District, or the ruins of a Roman fort, and they had a sauna room in there. You know, just off Hadrian's Wall thousands of years ago. So, yeah, I have seen studies that show that the cold is very effective for recovery, or effective for recovery. I've seen studies that show it depletes inflammation, and actually inflammation, we might want that initially after training. That's part of the body's response to adaptation and how it changes things. So I've seen both sides of that. Same with heat. Cold, apparently, I've seen, can deplete testosterone, and that's made a big thing out of that, especially in social media. With similar age, I'm sure you get the same adverts that I do all the time on Instagram and such. Like, I don't know where they come from, but apparently I will have low testosterone and I need some. So I keep getting told. Whereas hot bath can increase testosterone. There's just very similar findings on both sides, and I think that the biases are probably inherent within the testing. People subconsciously, I'm sure most of the time, good quality studies and such like, but they want to go out and show that cold is better than, So yeah, I'm quite relaxed about people knowing that what they're doing isn't the treatment, it isn't the thing, but it can be a nice addition. Don't do it instead of the basics, but if you want to add something in and that feels powerful to you, then, as long as you're otherwise in good health and able to jump in a sauna and then a cold pool and what have you, go for it. I won't be joining you, but go for it.
Yeah. There you go,
I'm
Andy.
convinced that the only reason people feel great after, cold water plunges, cold water baths and that kind of thing is because they're no longer in a cold water bath. That's why they feel so good.
That's right. That's right. And yeah, I mean, even if it's a placebo, even if if we are convinced it makes us feel better, then it probably does, because just mind is most powerful.
Yeah.
Awesome, Andy. Great. No, thanks for sharing your perspective on that one as well. Okay, finally, I thought we could speak for a little bit about how does, again, the aging warrior come up with this, let's say, this plan, this maintenance schedule, say, on a weekly basis.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say, we have a 50-year-old runner or climber who wants to stay injury-free and strong, but isn't changing PRs, personal records. Do you maybe speak to what should their ideal week of training and movement include, which combines both like their sport and the other things?
Yeah. And I think generally my advice would be, before I do my usual caveat of saying depends on the individual, their training history, what their goals are, is that time limited, are they pushing towards something, or do they just want to keep maintaining and improving? So all of that.
Absolutely, yeah.
But what we really know that is going to help both health and your performance is improving your capacity, your strength, general strength training, which for the climbers out there, and I know not everybody who is both on your podcast and listens to your podcast are climbers. I've come here through that avenue, but I like the fact that you speak to people from all sorts of different backgrounds and sports and such, like we all can learn from each other. It's that general maintenance or increase of muscle mass and strength that gives us the capacity to do more, and that's where you then improve in your sport. If you can run more frequently, run at a higher intensity, for a longer distance or what have you, because you've built that capacity up through some off the track or off the wall strength training. And interesting, climbing in itself, although we can feel pretty tired after a climbing session, my opinion, and certainly people that know better than I do as well, is that climbing doesn't really count as a strength exercise for health, where we're wanting to maintain lean muscle mass so that we're able to, that's great for systemic health, for blood sugar control, for blood pressure, for all of these issues. Yeah, so my it would be to find some way to fit in with some strength training. Now, that does not have to be 3 times a week, 2 hours at a time in the gym, working at an exhausting hypertrophy, that you walk out of the gym and your legs collapse going down the stairs because it was leg day. You're not going to be running the day after that, are you? And that's just going to interfere with your running. There's some fantastic programs and such like out there that are about that, little and often, and build slowly. You can't build capacity quickly. It's got to be built over time. Or you may, if you're in a sport that has an off season, we were discussing with my partner the other day, because I wanted to actually get in this year a hypertrophy program for hopefully 2 blocks of 6 weeks. So that was my thinking of putting, where I would really make that my focus. I would back off from climbing and make that the focus. We're having a run of fantastic weather here in the UK at the moment, so no way am I going in the gym. If that carries on through summer, I'm going to carry on. Then I've got a trad trip over to Ireland. Then we're going to Dacia in Turkey. Then we're going to Spain for sport climbing. Then back to Morocco in February. So where's my off season? I'm incredibly fortunate. I've just said that out loud. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. But yeah, climbers don't really have an off season, do we? We travel and go where the weather is. So we're either training for a trip or we're in season at home, and so it can be difficult. So I've dropped to a maintenance, 2, sometimes 3 sessions a week, 1 compound movement, few accessory movements, couple of accessory movements, say deadlift, although actually I find that quite tiring if I'm going hard at deadlifts, so it might be Romanian deadlift, single Romanian deadlift, something like that. A couple of lower limb accessories around that, couple of upper limb accessories, done, get out of there. And then the other day it'll be an upper body day, so I'll have a push, overhead press, whatever it might be, couple of other accessory upper bodies, couple of lower limb accessories, get out of there. In and out of the gym in under an hour, 2 or 3 times a week. You can do a lot of climbing gyms now have gyms in them, actual weight training facilities. Stick it in after you're climbing. Not ideal, but better than nothing. So yeah, the number one, I would say, get strength in there. Now, if you're smart about your strength work, if you're doing split squats, for example, something like that, work through range. You can get your mobility work in, if you're squatting, squat as deep as you are able. If that feels a bit whatever, you could do kettlebell squats, goblet squats. You could get in a Smith machine. You could use a squat machine, use a leg press machine, whatever. Don't be precious about it and feel you have to use free weights and such like. Yeah, and work through your full range. That's great for mobility. So you can get your strength and a mobility hit in one. But yeah, if you change anything, it has to be changed slowly. So bring these things in, have a think about how slow it should be, and then make it slower. Would be my
got it. Yeah. Well, that point about being able to create a training plan or maybe being able to periodize one's training. I think your experience and mine as well indicate that life is messy. The weather outside is unpredictable, and it is difficult to stick to those plans unless one is a professional paid athlete preparing for like the World Cup.
Yeah.
So for the rest of us, it feels like having a general maintenance plan, which allows for uh, a moderate level of flexibility, makes
Mhm.
a ton of sense. And
Yeah.
that is something that I try to practice as well, is make sure I get these things in when I can,
Mm.
and make sure that I get these in a reasonable level of dosage
Yeah.
on a monthly basis, right? Because
Mhm.
sometimes there are weeks when one is climbing outside or on a different type of trip and one does not get that in. And the second thing also, again, you can't, yeah, one can't repeat this enough, is take on something slowly, build
Mm.
up to it,
Yeah.
especially when one is throwing around heavy weights. I learned this the hard way recently, where after several months in rural Mexico without access to a gym, I was elated to come here to Salt Lake City and have access to like the wonderful facilities. And I went and immediately attacked the deadlift
Yeah.
movement. And
Yeah.
right away, I mean, you would think that with all my years of, you know,
No, no. And
losing hair,
I do it
I would
too,
have
Kush.
learned.
I do it. I do it too. We're all, we're athletic. We like moving. We like challenging ourselves. We like working hard. We like that feeling, and we're enthusiastic. And you were saying, I was psyched. I was like, yeah, fantastic. Yeah. So hard to
Yes,
put a lid on that. Yeah. I hope you didn't do
yes.
yourself too much,
I
too
think I
much
will.
harm.
No, I am much better, but yeah, I definitely overdid it, because I think
Yeah.
another lesson here is that is one needs to build up again and again. When one is younger, one is doing something for the first time. One can seem to continue to grow and improve
Mm,
infinitely. But then you get older
mm,
and you're like, okay, you know what? I was doing this at this point, but
mm,
I can't just suddenly go to the gym and start deadlifting like multiple plates. And
mm.
because that's where I left off. No, one has to kind of build that pyramid, maybe
Yeah.
not from scratch, but one has to again
No.
ease into that modality.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, thanks for being kind, but I should have been smarter with what I was doing. Now I've had to pay a price, and hopefully gotten a good lesson out of it. Any final words on again, just keeping up with maintenance? I mean, you've said so many good things, Andy. I don't know if there's anything left, but
It
in
is.
case there's something.
I liked your point actually, Kush, about it being sort of slightly more bigger picture and not just about this week. It's about this month. It's about this season. Are you getting enough in over the season or over the month or whatever you're looking at? And I suppose you could describe it as a flexible, non-negotiable. Yeah, you've got to get it in. Yeah, but it's okay for it to be more at this end than that end. There is some flexibility within that. And if you have had some time off, again, the flexibility comes in around the level that you might do it at. You're after stimulating your body to a suitable level. If you've been away from it for a while, that suitable level is lower than it was before, but that's okay. You're still going to stimulate your body because it doesn't need as much stimulus because it's not as highly trained as it was. So don't feel you have to come back and hit a certain marker.
Brilliant. Yes, we're not trying to be power lifters here. We're just trying to provide our
Yeah,
body the stimulus that it needs. Because again,
yeah,
yeah, perfect,
yeah.
Andy. And I always love your words of wisdom, your philosophy on mindset. You know it. Yeah, you've talked about it, and I love everything you share. Any thoughts on that we haven't covered, you think, on mindset differences that aging athletes can benefit from when it comes to movement, when it comes to staying just thriving over the long term? One point that you made earlier, which again is so true, which is again just not giving into the societal narrative, which is, hey,
Yeah,
yes, you are old. Yes, your batchmates cannot do these things anymore. So it's fine if you cannot either. And I think that in my mind, that is maybe just the number one mindset shift is just don't don't go with that poisonous flow
yeah,
of thinking. Think for
yeah.
yourself. So
Don't just
outside
yeah,
of that,
yeah. Challenge it, challenge it. Yeah,
challenge it. Yes,
yeah. I would say really just go where your enthusiasm is. It's okay after, I don't know, 25 years of climbing to think, oh, climbing's not doing it for me anymore. I might want to, look at something else, or to find a new challenge within climbing, or whatever your sport is, a different variant of it, a different, keep things fresh, because if things are fresh and you've got the psyche, you've got the drive and commitment to want to do something, then it'll get done. So, if you're feeling bored, you've not got the motivation, that type of thing, change things up. Don't keep doing the same old, same old.
absolutely. Yes, keep things fresh. You know,
Yeah,
keep things
yeah, keep the
interesting.
sight. Yeah.
Keep the side. Any, I thought I would ask you this just for fun. Any stories of maybe one or two of clients who have really embraced, this shift and yeah, surprised themselves?
I can think of many clients who have impressed me. I don't think any of them will have surprised themselves. Yeah, because they've got that mindset. They haven't been surprised, if that makes sense, to sort of make that difference. So one person I'm thinking of currently, uh, Rob Matheson, who's a Lake District based traditional climber. You should speak to him. He's in his early to mid 70s. He's just climbed a climb in E7, so that's kind of, I think, 7B plus,
Yeah, not to
four
not to
grade.
button not to button at all, but I just had him on the podcast yesterday.
Fantastic.
Absolutely
Brilliant.
blown away by
Yeah,
Rob.
what a
And
what a gent.
yeah,
An absolute one of the
yes,
nicest people you'll
yes.
ever meet. And I'd still meet people that he used to teach who will still talk about Mr. Matheson and how he was the best teacher at their school and that kind of thing. But he went to windsurfing, came away from climbing, he's come back to climbing in his later years, and that type of thing. And he's just, it's not come as a surprise. He's worked really hard. Yeah. And I think that's an important point. I think the people actually that I will use as examples are when I've ended up working with the parents of people that I've either treated or coached or know. And they've said, my mum's struggling with her hip or this, or she's not able to garden or whatever anymore. Could you do something for her? And then I've spoken to these people who are not, they're active. They might walk, they garden, do home improvement, that kind of thing, but they're not sporty people. Yeah, and then that's amazing, changing their perception and changing their abilities and changing their outlook. They're surprised. They get surprised. They're like, oh, we didn't, think this was possible. That's ace. Yeah, flipping love that.
And I'm sure those are the moments when you're like, this is why I put in countless hours and love into the work I do. When
Yeah,
you have people such as yours. Andy, this has been brilliant. This concludes our series,
Yeah,
and
it's been fantastic. Thank you.
it really has been. The feedback has been great.
Thank you.
I read through your book some time ago,
Right.
the the guide to self-treatment for climbing injuries.
Yeah.
You have, yeah, you have created some great resources for not just for climbers, but for all athletes. Would you mind taking a second and pointing us to where people can again learn about the work that you're doing, and then maybe find these books?
Yeah, okay, yeah, yes. This is where I have to try and remember things. So my website is processphysiotherapy.co.uk. Instagram is process physio. They're the two main places that you can find me, I suppose, and what I'm up to. But yes, there's things like, well, yeah, the book, obviously, unlevel edges, pulley splints, various things. But I'm also, I do genuinely, I don't mind chatting with people. I don't mind, giving something the once over, or what. I don't necessarily mean injury wise, where with somebody saying, what should I do? How should I bring this in, or does this look like a sensible idea to you, and that kind of thing. And yeah, I just love the conversations because I always learn from it as well. Because my response, say if somebody gets in touch to say I'm trying to bring this in and I'm struggling, and I will learn something from why they want to. Is it the right thing for them? What is it that they're struggling with? Is it a lifestyle thing? Is it a physical thing? And how do we solve that? And I'll use that in future. So yeah, I'm always always up for a chat with people and that kind of thing. So if people want to ask something, just send me an email, get in touch.
Brilliant, Andy. And then, there are many people listening who are outside of outside of, let's say, driving or biking distance to where you provide your services in person. So are you available currently for remote physical therapy or even remote climbing coaching? Is that,
Yeah, certainly
do you
the
I know
remote.
you're busy. Yeah.
Yeah, the remote physical therapy. Yes, absolutely. There are some restrictions on it that I would, won't bore everybody with the details around that at the moment. But yes, do get in touch. If I can't help you, I can certainly point you in the direction of excellent other climbing specialist physical therapists that there are out there who can. But yes, remote's a big part of the work now. Probably, I wouldn't say 50-50, but maybe 40% of my workload is remote based. Works surprisingly well because I think partly when you do work how I do, which is about the person, it's about the big picture, it's about the lifestyle factors, the holistic things that are going on, reducing life stresses, making sure they're doing the basics, all of this kind of stuff before we even talk about what exercise are we going to do for the sore elbow, because there's no point doing the exercise for the sore elbow unless we've got all that in place. It's, it works incredibly well, remote physio. So yeah, give
Awesome,
it a
Andy.
go.
Brilliant, Andy. You are so kind. One question I forgot to ask you earlier
Mhm.
on this topic, which is, if people are, again, these days there is just so much information out there, right? But if people are looking to select a trainer or a coach, any specific things they should look for to identify how that particular coach or specialist can be good for them?
Yeah, so it seems, I mean, many different countries have, I certainly know that in Australia, you don't have to be, there's no coaching qualification, I don't believe, at all. In the UK, there are coaching qualifications, pretty, you've got to really get your work, do your work rather to get them. So you can look at those as a badge of quality in some ways and that kind of thing. But as with physio and coaching, you're working with people, you know, and it's the communication and the support and the people skills. So whether somebody's got a badge or they've not got a badge, to say that they're a coach or not, ask around, find other people that have worked with them, testimonials, ask them for references, all this kind of stuff they should be totally open with, and speak with them. Do you get on with that person? Because they may be the best, whatever that means, coach in the world. But if you guys don't get on, that's not going to be a successful relationship. Yeah, you will be more successful with somebody that you engage with and that you get on with and that you trust. But that's definitely what I would say. And somebody that's prepared to work with other people as well. If I'm working with somebody who has a coach and a strength and conditioning coach and, nutritionist or whatever, this kind of thing, I like to try and make contact with all of those people and, we work together. Whereas if you find somebody's a bit sort of protective and like, this is my territory or this is my, then that's, that's putting themselves first and not the person. Somebody, I would say more than anything, somebody that you trust and you really get on with is more important than badges. But obviously do check out, previous clients, ask around, get, second opinion, that kind of thing.
Sounds brilliant, Andy. Yeah, I think sounds like there are 3 steps. One is, find the type of coach who can work with people such as yourself. Second, yes, one can these days find references, testimonials, even better when they come from your community. And number 3, maybe the most importantly, have that conversation. Make sure you can get along with that person. Make sure you can build a rapport long term. Make sure you can, talk about your fears, your concerns, and share things that the other person can relate with. Amazing, Andy. Thank you again so much for taking the time and
I've really enjoyed it.
getting on with
you.
Brilliant. And we'll stay in touch. That's it, folks. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Ageless Athlete Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this show just as much as I enjoyed creating and producing it. Whether you are an athlete looking to push your limits or someone striving to maintain a healthy, active lifestyle as you age, there is always something new to learn. From Ageless Athlete, we bring you a fresh episode each and every week. If you liked what you heard, we would love it if you would take a moment to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an update. And if you really liked what you heard, please leave us a review, crush those 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever else you listen to your podcasts. It helps us reach more people who are passionate about staying strong and resilient, no matter their age. Don't forget to visit our website and leave your email so I can send you occasional insights, stories, and tips to keep you inspired and motivated on your journey. You can also follow us on Instagram at Ageless Athlete Podcast and on YouTube at Ageless Athlete Podcast as well for even more great content. All of these links are available on the show notes for this episode. This show is entirely produced by me, Kush Khandelwal, based out of California with the help of my trusted adventure pup, Roger. Until next time, keep challenging yourself. Keep pushing those limits. Stay mentally and physically fit. Continue doing what you love to do. And my friends, stay ageless. Friends, this is not an ad. This is just a quick message to those amongst us who are listening to Ageless Athlete podcast for the first time. I would love it if you would hit subscribe and follow on your favorite podcast app, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Stitcher or Overcast or what have you, we bring you stories and routines and other inspiration from elites in the world of the best outdoor sports. In each episode, you will find how these athletes stay connected to the outdoors, maintain peak performance, and continue to thrive as they age. I encourage you to look through prior episodes and listen to a couple and see if they resonate. And then, come back next week. We release an episode each week. And I am really inspired to bring you some of the best stories from the world of the outdoors. Okay, back to the show.